A little bit about you. So you said you're in Chicago. Have you lived, was that where you're born? Is that where you've lived your whole life?
No, I was born up in Wisconsin and I moved to Chicago about 12 years ago now. And between the ages of 17 and I think I moved here when I was like almost 30. I traveled and lived all over the United States and a little bit of time in the Caribbean islands. And yeah, I love Chicago. It's a good fit for me.
When you say you lived all over the US, was it many places?
It was. Well, I did the nomadic thing for a bit. So I when I first graduated high school, I gave away everything I owned and carried what I could in a backpack, and I hitchhiked and I hopped freight trains and traveled all around the country. And then I took a little time to live in New Orleans, and I lived in California for a stint. I lived in New York City and Brooklyn for a little bit. And then, yeah, Chicago.
So you, out of all of the places that you've lived and all of the travels that you've done, would you say that that really helped shape you as a person that you are today doing
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Right. Like all of our experiences shape us. So definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I travel, I learn more about who I am, you know? So I'm kind of uncovering myself everywhere I go, the people I meet, the experiences that I have. I'm learning more about me and what it means to be a human. I've always said this, but I feel like if we were given somehow more of an opportunity to go and do that, as we're developing, you know, before we really get stuck into like a career or like a long-term relationship and, you know, have a family, I feel like if we were somehow allowed or given more resources to do that, it would change the world completely. It would really dramatically change the world. And I'm just having a wet dream here, right? Because this is never going to happen.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a government-funded scheme by any means. But I mean, I can imagine how liberating that must have felt. And it wasn't. I mean, how old were you when you started doing that?
I was 17. I left home at 15.
Right.
And then I graduated
Wow.
school and graduated early and I hit the road.
So tell me a bit about your childhood, if you can. I'm interested. What was that like for you? Are your family are your parents still together? Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have 3 brothers. My parents are not together. They divorced when I was 10. And I had I had a sort of idyllic childhood, I feel, from birth until I was about 10. Idyllic in the sense that we grew up in the country. I was a major tomboy. My brothers and I played army and had all this territory. We grew up in nature. You know, it was a very kind of rural area at the time. It's pretty developed nowadays, but back then it was just quite nature rich. And we had all the forests all kind of mapped out with territory and made forts in the woods and went sledding in the winter. And when I was 10 and my father left, then began a bit more of a traumatic childhood experience. Just sort of coincidentally, I also experienced sexual assault, and my mother was pretty significantly depressed, trying to find her way with 4 children and no education. And my father ended up marrying his secretary, sort of a storybook, cheating kind of scenario. And by the time I was 15, I had developed a pretty significant anxiety, disorder. And being home was really difficult for me because the environment was very triggering for me. And so at that age, I knew I needed to leave. I had run away a few times before then, and the police were called on me and I was brought home. And this time when I was 15, I just very seriously asked my mother to let me go because I knew what I needed to heal myself. And I needed to face my fears and I needed to find a different environment. And so she said, "You have my permission, but not my blessing. Don't ever ask me for anything." Those were her parting words. And I left and I made it and found my way. I couldn't get an apartment because I didn't have a parent to co-sign my lease. And so I ended up in the housing cooperative system, which was, sort of a surrogate family to me. I met a lot of really beautiful people with a lot of beautiful values in that community. And it was a real game changer. And my mother and I were able to reunite and bond more deeply than ever. And she's my best friend now and has been for many years. But that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Wow, that's really amazing. It's amazing that you came full circle and somehow were able to like rebuild that relationship.
It wasn't her fault.
Completely, it sounds.
She was going through her own thing. She's a human being. She had a lot on her plate. She was in her 30s with 4 kids and no degree, no education, no job. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was an artist. And I have a lot of empathy for what she survived through emotionally, But at that time, I really had to take care of myself because it had become very dire. So, yeah. And my brothers, 2 of my 3 brothers are also, we're very close. And the third, unfortunately, in the past couple of years, actually, there's been a big falling out because I adopted his daughter, my niece. And there was a bit of a legal situation there that we had to go through to protect her from some stuff that she was enduring. And so that's kind of a new development, but for a different podcast, I believe. So,
is that your child now, or do you have more than one?
So
child?
I have one biological son. He's 5. And then we adopted my niece, who actually identifies as non-binary and goes by the pronouns they and them. And so they are actually, when we adopted them, they were 16 and they just turned 18. So we are in the process of preparing for a move to college, which is exciting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That, obviously I want to talk about that, but that seems to be a different podcast
100%.
episode for sure. But good for you for doing that, because that's very kind of you and very heartwarming as well. It's not easy to make that decision. I guess maybe it is easy to make that decision, but it's not. It's a lot of responsibility, basically. So,
It is, but we have to look out for the people we love in this life. What else is more important than that, really?
Yes, I agree with you. Which is why I suppose from one perspective, you could see it as an easy choice. But yeah, we
an
need
easy
more people.
choice, but a difficult task, right?
Yes. Kind of paradoxical a little bit, traditionally speaking. But, I can see how that whole process of you going through the abuse, going through the anxiety, and needing to get some space and time led you down that path and helped you to meet those people. What were those people like? I'm curious. What kind of people did you meet, and do you still see them? Do you still speak to them today?
Yeah, a number of them I do. One of them became my absolute best friend. She was my maid of honor, and she's the one that I traveled with when we were 17. And that whole trip actually started around the fireplace. We were sort of daydreaming together in this housing co-op about, it being our campfire. And we just sort of carried on with this daydream. Like, imagine if we just jumped off a train and, la, 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 la. And then about 3 to 4 months later, we decided to make it happen. But the people I met in these co-ops, the ones that I landed in, thankfully, were based around, some shared values concerning environmentalism and activism and sustainability. And I think that that community in general, like, people who care about things beyond themselves, there tends to be a common thread of empathy and compassion. And so it was a co-ed cooperative. The first one I was in high school had 30 people. So I had 30 roommates, all ages, men and women. And we had shared meals in our shared kitchen and shared dining room space. And we each had our own bedrooms, and each floor had a bathroom that everyone shared that lived on that floor. And I lived there for a couple of years and then traveled. And when I actually I eventually came back to Wisconsin to start college when I was 26. So I traveled until then, and then came back to start school. And then I moved into another co-op at that time because I just actually really enjoyed the community. So there's a really nice co-op system in Madison, Wisconsin. I haven't found anything similar in Chicago. And at one point I was looking before we ended up landing where we did. But yeah, it's a thing.
Community seems to be it's on the top of my mind recently with all of the division that's going on. It makes you question, when you see things on the news, such bipolarism in politics and society. Mm-hmm. It makes you question traditional structures a lot, it makes you question the direction we're heading in as a race, and
absolutely.
Brings up some important questions, brings up some important conversations, thoughts. I mean, it's hard to talk about those things because everyone's so sensitive about it, but those are the kinds of conversations I think we need to be having. When it comes to community, it feels to me like, based on what you're saying, you very, very highly regard community in your life, and it's been instrumental to you. What do you feel community is today compared to what it was maybe a couple of generations ago? Because I feel like there's been definitely some evolution and de-evolution. It seems to me like we're somehow more connected than ever, but less as well at the same time, paradoxically.
Yeah, I think I'm somebody who adapts well, and I embrace platforms such as these, and I don't find that I am as uncomfortable as some people with connecting virtually with people. I'm not sure why people have so much pushback to it. It's just another method. It's the evolution through technology, of more ways to connect and to make it convenient and to make it more international in nature, which I love. I think from traveling so much, and when I traveled, it was pre-cell phones, and so when I was out there on the road and even traveling with a friend, if we separated for 2 weeks, we had to plan to meet somewhere because there was no way to keep in touch with each other, and so we would say, in 2 weeks on Friday, meet me at the fish market in Seattle, that kind of thing. And it was just so fun, so organic. I remember when the internet really first started to evolve and I was able to connect with people on these social media platforms and see these faces in the Caribbean islands and New York City and all these places that I really didn't know when I would get back to them, and I was never stationary enough to have a phone number. And so it was really difficult for me to stay in touch. And so I love social media, and I've never fallen out of love with it because I'm able to multitask, staying in contact with all of these beautiful human beings that I care about. And even if it is, a little surface level at times, it's something, it's something. And I like watching people's children grow up. I like seeing people go through things in life. I like reading what people choose to share, I think it's really enriching personally. And yes, I mean, you're 100% right. I hold community in super high regard. I think in America anyways, there is an individualistic mindset that is, perpetuated through our media and culture. And it's sad, but I've always been more deeply embedded in the subculture here. And so for me, the community stays strong. And I have a lot of sort of extended family and brothers and sisters and people that, I swap I love yous with before we get off the phone. And, people who I gather with for different purposes, whether it's, to celebrate the full moon or to talk business or, to collaborate with creatively, whatever it is. I think it is what we make it,
Yes, definitely. And you bring up some really good points. I think there is a negative sentiment growing towards socializing online, but for good reasons, obviously. And we're both aware of those, right? I mean, it can be very dangerous to get all your information from social platforms, especially if you're subscribed to content and people that produce content that isn't necessarily productive and helpful, and kind of brings out the worst in you because it reinforces the idea that perhaps you're not enough. I'm talking about things like, the perfect life, being a billionaire, being an entrepreneur, there's nothing wrong with those things, but I think there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of confusion about, well, what's important in life, and I can see how this is incredibly damaging. The ability to kind of just subscribe to anything, anywhere, anytime, and just feed yourself constantly. For the generations today who are going to have to develop with this or are developing with this, and there's no study on it yet. There's no real comprehensive long-term study because it hasn't even happened yet. So we're all just sitting on the edge of our seats waiting to find out what actually happens in the end. But on the other hand, the points that you brought up are totally legitimate, that it is a blessing to be able to connect with people in an instant. And, we're talking about the good relationships, the good connections, the ones that are productive and valuable and help you grow as an individual. And I remember when you brought up the fact that it was pre-internet when you were traveling, so you had to remember phone numbers. I'm 37, so I'm totally with you on that one, right? I remember that. I loved it. I actually loved it.
Me too.
I have nostalgia. I probably would drive me insane today. But I remember forgetting phone numbers that I kind of, of women that I would meet in the club when I was younger. And I would be like, why did I just, having long distance phone calls with people that I'd met on vacation.
Did you have a pager?
And it was just so expensive.
Did you have a pager? A beeper? Yes.
I had a pager that dropped in the toilet.
No.
I dropped it in the toilet. Yeah, that was the end of my pager.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the days. But
honestly, what you're saying is it's so true, and it's so interesting, and I guess it brings to light the need for accountability, I guess, to the way that you're using social media, because I remember taking a psychology class back in college, and there was this little exercise that we did around the lessons of comparison, right? And it was this person that was homeless, and they were looking to their right, and there was a person living in a box, and they didn't have a box, right? And so they felt that they were lacking. And then they looked to their left, and there was a person who had passed away because they froze to death, whatever it is. Then you go to the person in the box. They look to their left, that person doesn't have a box. So they feel really fortunate because they do have a box, right? But then they look to the right, and this person has a small house. So now they feel they're lacking, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes on and on and on, always in whatever direction you're kind of comparing yourself. And I think there's a fine line between aspirational and like depressing in a sense, right? And so with my personal social media consumption, I think that I do a decent job keeping it pretty focused on connecting with people I actually know, especially, on Facebook and these things. I don't accept friend requests from people I don't know. I don't spend time on there arguing about politics. I spend time on there just connecting with loved ones, period, making people laugh, sharing that type of content. And I've been involved enough in activism and politics, I guess, to feel a clear conscience about that. I think some people feel they have to do something, and that's sort of their way of doing something. But I don't feel the need to do anything on social media when it comes to, my political views and values. And then, on Instagram, I'll really, I have my accounts kind of divided. I've got my private space that's private, where I do family posting and I make photo albums from that account. And then I've got my business stuff, and then I connect purely sort of with other, creatives and photographers and people in that industry in that way. But I can see that. It's cool though. And it's actually encouraging to see my teenage niece navigate this environment, this sort of social media environment, because I think that their generation is actually kind of bringing it full circle. They even use email to communicate because they feel it's more safe. And so, oh, really? Yeah, for sure. So there's an awareness there that I didn't know, because I'm 41. But learning through them, and they're 18, I actually feel encouraged because I think they're very smart. And they were born with this technology in their hands, so they've been able to master it in a way that our generation has not. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to get away from email, but maybe
Why?
I'll come back to it.
Why?
It's just anxiety.
Really?
Anxiety. And well, I think it depends what emails you're getting. I mean, if the emails are kind of work related, then yeah, it can be anxiety inducing for sure. But if it's if it's just whatever, I think email, when you communicate with email, it's a lot more productive than communicating on instant messenger. On instant messenger, you lose the pace of the conversation. You can get lost. You find yourself like, oh God, I could have just said all of that in like one email.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is what it is, and I think it's only going to become even more pervasive. But anyway, I mean, it's nice to know what you think about social. It's nice to know what you think about community today. I wanted to ask you, when did you meet your current, your husband, right? You're married.
Yes, we're married.
Yeah. When did you meet?
I met my husband.
Your husband.
Yeah. Let me think. I think we met 13 years ago and we've been together for 12.
Right. I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. And where did you guys meet and how?
So, funny story. I had just moved to Chicago and I was managing a bar as my first job here. I, within a couple of months, told off the owner because he was terrible. And I quit that job and I didn't know anyone here and I didn't have any other job lined up. And I was putting myself through college and I stressed and I didn't know what to do. And I had to do something fast to make ends meet. And one of my bartenders from that bar said, I can get you a job bartending at the other bar I work in, but I don't think that you'll like it. I can get you this job. You're not going to like it, but I could get you in there tonight. And I said, I'll take anything. Have you seen the movie Coyote Ugly?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was that kind of thing. And
Wow.
So I was asked to dance on the bar and to wear a certain outfit. And I was horrified, but desperate for the money. So I did it. And I prayed that no one I knew would walk through the door before I found another job. Right. And so I worked there for 2 weeks. But on my first night, all the security guards and people were kind of, like shooting their shot, the new girl in town. And my now husband was one of the men that approached me at the bar, and he was more respectful than the others. And he kind of just sat down and he said, I see stars, when he was looking at me, and I gave him the fingers crossed kind of no-go, like get it back up, buddy, kind of thing. And he did back up and he left completely. And then I felt bad because he was actually really handsome and very respectful. And so I was just not in any mood. At that time, I had actually just left a pretty abusive relationship and was just really not looking to date at all. And which is another reason I was a little disoriented. I moved to Chicago actually for a boyfriend at that time. And so I had just left him and quit this job and I was just very disoriented. And so I asked the other girls that I was working with, who that was. And I felt bad for, being a little standoffish. And they told me who he was and that he was a total sweetheart and that he worked actually next door. He didn't even work in the bar. And so I approached him a few days later, apologizing and gave him my number and asked if we could maybe connect sometime. And so then kicked off a little Friends with Benefit fund for about a year, which then led to us being roommates and then falling in love. And there's sort of this whole evolution, but we dated for 4 years before he proposed and we were engaged. And then we got married 8 years ago. Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's just funny that I didn't want to see anyone I knew in this bar. And I did only end up working there for 2 weeks and I met my husband, right? The irony.
I guess so. Yeah. You're trying so hard not to be noticed, but, you found the one person you're going to spend the rest of your life with in there. And it's nice. It's because, you went back and because of that, you're now with your husband. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Imagine if you hadn't. I mean, you wouldn't know, so you wouldn't probably think twice about it. But now that you know, you're
For
like, oh
sure.
my God, that was like a pivotal
Yeah.
moment for me, and I made the right choice. Um,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of times in life when you kind of, I think our instincts are really powerful. I don't know. There's something special about your instinct, and we don't pay enough attention to it usually. I don't. I write answers on Quora every day just because of our business in the relationships section. And most of the questions that are asked could be solved by just simply listening to your instinct. But we've kind of disconnected ourselves from that. So good for you. Good for you. I think you obviously benefited a lot from that decision. So now comes the topic of discussion. So how did it begin, the whole kind of having a non-monogamous marriage, because that's what this conversation is about, right? How
Yeah.
did that conversation start? Was there a build up to it, or was it like a sudden thing?
There was definitely a buildup. When I first, like I said, we were sort of friends with benefits for that first year of our relationship, our friendship. And during that time, we both had other people that we were seeing. And my husband was always someone who, I refer to him sometimes as passive, which he hates. But truly, like, that is the energy that I felt then and that I feel now. In certain contexts, but it has taken on new meaning now, but at that time it meant that I initiated everything. And so I could do that because I had other lovers, I had other people that were initiating things with me. And so I was able to sort of transfer that energy. Everything felt very balanced. And I liked the sort of gentle and calm energy that my husband carried himself with. And he looks like a tough guy, but he has a very gentle and nurturing nature. And so, that was very appealing at that time. Again, coming out of a pretty abusive relationship, it was even more appealing. And so I felt a lot of comfort with him. But after we had been monogamously with one another for 3-4 years, I started to feel myself craving to feel desired in a way that he wasn't accomplishing because of his passivity. I would beg him, to compliment me. I would beg him to initiate sexual interactions. And it just wasn't who he was. He wasn't that guy. We were probably 3 years in when we hired our first like couples counselor or like sex therapist. We've done both. And several of them were pretty worthless because my husband and I actually were always very good together. Like on a life level, we've always had a really beautiful friendship. We communicate very well. We're very affectionate with each other, but it was starting to become an issue of like erotic energy, just lacking for me. And I remember one time, this one of our sex therapists asked, why he changed, why the change, why this or that. And I said, to be fair, he has not changed. It's me flipping the script because I was always willing to be the initiator. And I'm growing tired of it. And so to be fair, he's actually very consistent. But I'm realizing that it's leaving me wanting more, and it's making me feel insecure even, and I'm just longing to feel sexy. I'm longing to feel desired. And so it was a very slow build. Like I said, we went through a number of therapists. A couple of people didn't even know what to do with us because they wanted to see where we were having communication problems, and they just couldn't figure that out because that wasn't the issue. One of our therapists, when we were about 4 years in together, like this is probably the third guy that we tried, he recommended reading the book Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. And that book was the book that was kind of my pivotal moment in understanding my own psyche and what was happening for me in this relationship. She poses the argument that this traditional view by couples counselors of, sexual incompatibility or issues arising from communication problems, that this just isn't the case, and that it's sort of the reverse, that the couples that get along the best and have the easiest, most flowing communication oftentimes lack that erotic energy because, for better or worse, it seems to be human nature that there is a sort of erotic tone to emotions with negative connotations like jealousy and anger and insecurity and instability. And we didn't have any of that because we're very, very stable and good together.
Right. It's a very kind of, like you say, very kind of peaceful, passive, calm, tranquil, which when you say that, you wouldn't associate that with kind of fierce sexual energy, right?
Right.
It's kind of like what we're saying here. And that's interesting because I've never thought about it that way. So the fact that you brought that up, thank you. That's very helpful for me.
Yeah.
It helps me understand, some of the relationships that I've had too. And this was something that, one of the men in the Clubhouse room we were in the other day was talking about. I'm not sure if you were present, but he was talking about this, and he's got a lot of experience with this because it's his industry. So he was talking about how he's the kind of person that if he could choose between having a relationship with someone who is just clicking 100% and everything's great and it's fun and it's there's something great to talk about, something to look forward to, as opposed to a relationship where you're with someone who's like pretty crazy and unstable, but the sex is like the best.
Yep.
He's the kind of person that would say, I'll take the one with the best sex any day.
I remember this conversation.
Yeah. And it depends what kind of a person you are and where you are in life, I think. I remember something you said in that conversation too, which was people just don't understand when they judge you for, being in a non-monogamous relationship, what it might actually be like to have to go through that much time not being able to express yourself or receive the kind of sexual communication that you desire. And I don't know what that's like because that's a long time. I don't think I've been in relationships where the sex just died out, and that was like 5 years here, 5 years there. But I haven't been in a much longer relationship. And I think I'm the kind of person and whether or not this is something you subscribe to, I'm the kind of person whose love language is physical touch, first and foremost, beyond anything else.
Totally.
And so physical touch for me and sex and intimacy is so important that it literally kills relationships if I don't have that connection with someone. So the counselors, the therapy sessions and everything, you read the book. What were your thoughts? How did that change you? And when did you start to have the kind of thoughts, okay, we have to talk about this in a different way?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it helped me to not judge myself so much because I felt the itch to cheat. That's where I was. And he's a good person. And I have cheated before on other people. And with him, I loved him too much. And that was the first for me, to be in that situation where, because I did not want to lose him, it was worth trying to traverse this conversation. Right. The book helped me understand my psyche. It goes into these different case studies with no judgment about, even how cheating has saved marriages for some people, and it's just a really provocative view at different, just different scenarios, again, with no judgment, and like going deep into sexuality in these long-term relationships. And yeah, so at that point, I guess it kind of opened my mind a bit to know that well, plus I have a background in like branding and design. And I think that that helps me believe in like recreating identities and recreating things, you know? And so I feel like it did sort of have a hand in my thinking. Cause I realized like there are no rules here that we have to subscribe to. We are not particularly religious people. And so, you know, I think that I have friends that as a sort of spiritual practice, you know, practice monogamy. And that's beautiful for them. For us, we don't live our lives, you know, with any sort of religious foundation of that sort. And so for us, there are really no rules. And I'm like, you know, why not see if this is something that we can negotiate? And so I first brought it up to him because, okay, so back up. While we were in sex therapy, it had gotten to the point where, you know, one sex therapist asked him, why don't you initiate? And he said, because she always beats me to it. And this little switch went off in my brain. And I said, to myself, I said, I will not initiate. I will give him as much time and space as he needs. I will completely and totally give him that space, and we'll see how this goes. And it went 6 months. And at the end of those 6 months, I was so angry and so resentful. And I was literally watching the days and weeks, you know, I was watching a calendar, you know, to see how long it would take. And then I'm in a yoga class, I'm in Shavasana, and I said, you know what, this is insane. I will fuck my husband tonight. I am not going to let more time pass. And so I sent him a message before I got home, and I asked him to shower up and be ready. And he was thrilled, you know. And so I got home and I rocked his world, but I was really resentful, really, really resentful.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask, what is it? Just the person he is? I mean,
yes,
I'm trying to understand it.
Yes.
Right.
And it's wild because he's so sexual. He's actually incredibly sexy, and he's actually really good in bed, and there's no performance issues. If I say the word sex, he's rock hard and ready to go. It truly is like, you know, for example, you know, this is sort of I guess like a parallel comparison. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I am like to my core a go-getter, right? I was not a good fit working for other people and kind of being on their clock like to the minute, but I will bust my ass and work 80 hours a week for myself happily, right? My husband, at one point, I was sort of fantasizing about this life on the road and us, you know, road schooling our kid and traveling the world. And I wanted him to get into a career that offered him a lot more flexibility and opportunity for movement and, you know, to work remotely. And so we looked into a few different things. He ended up being really drawn to real estate. And so we were sort of exploring that. And at the end of the day, like he just was not somebody who was good at driving himself, to be honest. I mean, he's an artist and he is good at that. He's very good at that, but it's a very introverted sort of thing, you know. But when it came to selling or dealing with other people, it just is like he freezes. It was just not his comfort zone. And so I finally accepted that and realized that he's somebody who really thrives in and loves, you know, if it's not painting, he likes to work for someone where he's given a task and he's told what his schedule is and he knows when his paycheck comes, and that for him feels best, you know? And again, now that we're 12 years in together, all of this has taken on a much more positive meaning for me. But at that time, I really resisted it. And I really didn't understand it because I was used to being with more entrepreneurial minded people. I was used to, you know, being a bit more free and nomadic. And I really like fought against his very like docile nature for a while, you know?
Even though it was something that kind of you were drawn to as well because of the experiences that you'd had. And
sure.
Yes, right.
But it lost its novelty. You know, it was beautiful for the first couple of years. And then I got bored with it, to be honest, which is, you know, unfortunate, but true.
I'm just wondering now, I'm thinking, you know, because we're talking about sexual energies here and masculine and feminine, right? And men have servings of both and women have servings of both. And it really, a good relationship is when you can balance them, you know, so they're not, you're not too heavily towards masculine or too heavily towards feminine. And I'm like, You know, this is valuable information for people. These kinds of conversations help bring to light that the things that they're maybe at odds with in their relationship are perfect the way they are if you just change your frame of mind, because the chances are that you got together because of that very reason, like you're talking
Absolutely.
about now. And you know, yeah, even though, you know, you need a little bit of fire now and again, or a little bit of tranquility now and again, it's understandable. It's understandable why it's not in their blood. I mean, that's just the way that they developed. That's the person they became.
Absolutely.
So I'd be willing to bet that. I would be willing to bet that there's, and this is why we're having this conversation, there's a lot more to relationships than what is, I would say, constrained within them from a traditional mindset. And the traditional
Absolutely.
mindset is, you know, monogamy. And I want to start talking about how you guys came to the conclusion that trying a non-monogamous relationship was a legitimate way forward.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, after that 6-month stint, we went right back into it because, you know, I got it out of my system. I reconnected with him, and then I wanted to give him time again to try initiating. And we went another 6 months. And at that point, my resentment was so thick, and I was looking at him in a way that felt so unsexy that I kind of lost my own interest to initiate. And I felt my own sexuality sort of waning. And
Mm-hmm.
I sat with that for about a year. And I let it go. And we did not have sex for a year. We had, again, like day to day, a great relationship. We were affectionate with each other. Even we would cuddle on the couch. We would kiss each other. We would hold hands. You know, it was a really loving relationship. It just would never move into that more erotic territory. And so at the end of that year, I said, you know what, this is crazy. I mean, I literally felt like my body was becoming numb, you know, and we actually were about to have our son, who I did not carry. He's my biological son, but he was carried by another woman. I have damage to my uterus from a childhood surgery. And so, but I have ovaries. And so I was able to do an egg extraction and have my son with my husband. But again, he was baked by another woman. And so he was in utero and growing. And at that time, there was just something so big and so real about what we were doing together that I think it gave me courage to be honest about the fact that I was not wanting to give up on my sexuality. And so I one day had this conversation with him, and our son was probably, you know, the surrogate was probably like 5 months pregnant at this time. And we just sat in the car outside of a grocery store, and I told him how I was feeling, and that I had sort of this cheating, you know, kind of temptation that was coming into my mind. And I wanted to be honest with him about it because our friendship matters most to me. And I love him, and I don't want to deceive him and do wrong by him. But we need to talk about, like you said, like our path forward. And I mentioned that at this time, and I had, in all honesty, been a very possessive person leading up to this. You know, I was the woman who was looking at the bathroom mat for hair that wasn't mine when we were dating, you know? And so I'm by no means, you know, just some natural born, you know, non-monogamous. I was much more jealous and much more possessive even than my husband. But at this time, you know, I had really like settled into this relationship that we had established, and it made me feel very safe, and it made me feel very secure. And I knew I didn't want to lose him. And I also wanted to be honest with myself. And so I just kind of laid it out. And I said, you know, for the first time ever, I'm actually feeling like I could possibly get into having an open relationship with you, whether that's us swinging or like, maybe I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like we need to open up to other people sparking sexual energy for us, because I'm resenting having to be the one and you are just not being the one. And so maybe someone else can do it. So then it takes it off my shoulders and you don't have to do it. And then let's just see like what that feels like. And as always, you know, my husband was very like respectful and listened, and then said that it was not something he was interested in at that time. But he thanked me for my honesty, and that's where that landed. And I said, okay, well, I am still in this, and I'm still here. I'm still with you, but I want you to know that this is like where my mind is going. And I guess we'll just check back in, in a while. And so we let it go for an entire
Did he
year.
initiate?
No, 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 no. No. And so we went without having sex, by the way, that whole year. So we, it's so interesting. I mean, there's so many layers to this, actually. It's very wild, but we did not. So after that conversation, we just literally did not have sex again. We just kind of like chugged along. We have our friendship, our relationship. Our son ends up being born. And after our son was born, something must have clicked for him. Our son was probably about 6 months old, and I was in the throes. I had actually induced lactation so that I could breastfeed our son, even though I didn't carry him. And I was like really, really sleep deprived and just in it, And I think something just clicked for my husband. Maybe for him, that made him feel a level of security that made him feel a little safer, opening up to the possibilities too. And he randomly came to me one day and he said, I've been thinking about our conversation. I didn't even know what he was talking about. I said, what conversation? He said, the one about an open relationship. I said, oh, okay. I mean, that was a year ago at this point, right? And he says, I think I can handle it. I said, you think you can handle it? And I was very excited, but I said, well, what does it look like to you? In your mind, how does this play out? And he said, well, to be honest, I don't feel the desire to pursue other women, but I respect and understand that you're an adventurous person and you were adventurous before I met you. And I want you to be happy. And so I feel like I'm willing to try, you being with other people. And I was like, oh my gosh. And of course that was terrifying because it was one-sided, Yeah. And so I said, well, wait a second. I said, so you're talking about like being home with our newborn baby while I'm like out sleeping with other men? And he's like, well, when you put it like that, it's a little bit harsh, but I suppose, yes, that's what I'm saying. And I just thought, wow. And that wasn't what I was asking for. At that time, I actually was really afraid of us doing it without each other. I much more so had in my mind a kind of swinging, like maybe threesome or couple swapping sort of
something to spark it.
Yeah, something to spark it with each other. And so in my mind,
Yes.
It was always with each other. And he took it to this far extreme in his mind and was willing to go there, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I'll let you kind of guide the conversation from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I want to say something if anyone's listening who is already thinking, oh my God, how could she do that? It's, to me, it's all a question of respect, trust, dignity, honesty. I mean, if you're not going to be able to be in a relationship where you can be those things, what's the point of being in a relationship? We have this stereotype of what it means to be committed. And for the large part, it's a good one. I think it works for, at least rearing children. If you are 100% committed to someone, no matter what, and that's the marriage vows, right? Then the children stand the best chance of having a good childhood and having the support and the structure that they need to be able to develop properly. And I see that is something, even we're struggling with that, right? So to me, the marriage concept has kind of bounced around from being awful to good to I would never do that to actually I see the point and I think it's a good thing. And I just want to say, let's say when you do something selfish in a relationship, it doesn't even have to be sexual. You're really not playing that game. You're not part of a committed relationship necessarily. You're not compromising. You're not finding a way to move forward together. And the fact that you went through those years, because they are years of just no sexual activity, the fact that you had all those conversations, the fact that you had those therapy sessions, it really says a lot about you and your motives. And your motives are pure. And I can see that. And I think it's remarkable. I think it's also remarkable that people would still, after having said all of that, look at the situation and say, it's wrong, right? I get it. I mean, we're all conditioned to a certain degree. So I get it. There are people that would think, no matter what, doesn't matter what you've said, what you've been through, what you've done, it's not right. Don't do it. But listen to the conversation again, because you'll see that there is a process here where you're trying to communicate what's valuable to you, what's important to you as a person, as a human being, and you can't live your life in denial of those things. The least you can do is bring it up. And you did. And it seems to have worked out. And I take my hat off to you, because that is difficult to do. It's very difficult for you. It's difficult for your partner. It's difficult, and this is one of the reasons why we're having an anonymous conversation here, because it's difficult to share that. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point. And even more surprising to me was that he was willing to do that without, you'd think, oh, he's a guy, he's going to be totally fine with doing it himself as well. I mean, right. It's usually, I would say probably usually, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a male initiated kind of request, perhaps. So for him to be open to that and not partake in it is really impressive from my perspective. And it says a lot about the kind of partner you have, the kind of husband you have, to be able to have that relationship. So I'm just blown away, and I'm learning a lot from this conversation, about, and we can talk about this in a moment. I would like to know what you think about love. I would like to know what you think about commune, like relationships, intimate relationships, and what they mean to you. What's the objective? Because you have an evolved sense of that. You have a structure, you have children, and you're raising them together, but you're being individual too. You're not losing yourselves in that relationship. And that's amazing stuff. So I'd like to know, what does a relationship mean to you? And how do you see love now that you've started doing these things?
Wow. First of all, I'm just in awe of the way that you articulate things. You are an excellent podcast speaker and interviewer. You are. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that I agreed to do this with you, because I've been asked to do it with a number of people. And again, that intuition is always right thing. Something just made me feel very comfortable with you. And you're amazing. And I'm happy that your voice is out here for people to hear and engage with. So yeah, for sure. What is love to me? I think that this relationship for me, it defines like what love is to me. I think that love is honesty first and foremost, and at any cost. I think that people have been living individualistically when it comes to sex forever, which is why so many marriages fail. And cheating is such a mainstay in media. It's not even blinked at, but then people gawk at ethical non-monogamy, if ever, expressed in whatever, a TV series or whatever it is. I think we're at a transitional time right now when, it is starting to come out of the shadows, and be made more honest. And to be honest with you, my personal opinion is that is actually a woman-led kind of movement. I know far more women who are trying to take this out of the shadows to do what has been done for centuries, but do it more honestly and do it with more regard and more consideration for the people that we love, right? And so in my experience, maybe this is not true, but at least in my little bubble, I see more women that are kind of leading the way here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. But relationships for me, again, because of my personal values around community and people, they're the most important thing to me. I think that life is magical and bizarre and mysterious. And there's no greater thing than to connect with other life in this world, you know? And I think it's the greatest gift that we can give someone: our time, our future, our plans, our day-to-day existence, you know? And if you find someone that you do that well with, for me, I finally hit the epiphany that, you know, sexual incompatibility or sexual disconnection, at times, it doesn't need to be, the apocalypse, right? It can be seen in a sort of manageable kind of viewpoint or whatever. And so, I definitely was not somebody who was super traditional in my thinking growing up. I didn't fantasize about a wedding. I didn't know if I'd ever get married, and really, frankly, it was irrelevant to me. Partnership was something I craved. I knew I wanted to be a mom, and I knew that I wanted to do that in a way that felt safe and secure and healthy, you know, whatever that looked like. And so, but my husband was a bit more traditional. And so when we were dating, for him, before we had family, I knew that marriage was important to him. And so because of that, it became important to me, because it was him that I was in love with, right? But so even in our wedding vows, you know, we actually did not exchange that we are together through better and worse, and that this was a forever thing, no matter what. We exchanged vows that we were always free, and that being together needed to remain an active choice daily, and one that we were committed to because it's what felt best for us. And I think that that's really what serves us as the foundation for living in gratitude with one another daily. And what has given us this feeling. I think that if my husband felt pressured to open our relationship because he had made this vow to support me, you know, or whatever it was, I think that that would have been very uncomfortable for him. But because he knows that I truly stand by my word, that like, I want him to be happy, but I also will be honest with myself. And we just need to figure out what this looks like, even if that means that we split, no matter how deep into marriage we are, you know, every day, every week that we choose to stay in this, you know, it's because it's where we want to be. And so, yeah, I think, and also we are not drinkers, we're not drug users. And so I can imagine that when you bring substances into this sort of dynamic, it can create more unpredictability. And I would struggle with that. But knowing that I can trust my partner and that he can trust me to make all decisions out of a clear mind, you know, then we can hold each other accountable, and we can trust each other. So I know I didn't answer all the questions you asked. I don't actually remember exactly what they were.
I know there was a few. So when you mentioned the drugs and I didn't take drugs, but I did drink a lot. I was an alcoholic for a while.
So was my husband.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I mean, I am not an introvert. I am not very extroverted. So I'm kind of a little bit to the right of center, if you know what I mean, towards extroversion. Mm-hmm. And I drank a lot, and in my relationships, the ones that weren't very healthy, and it was my way of coping with the stress and the guilt of just careering into something that I knew was bad for me, but I wanted to do it anyway because it felt good at the time. And I've had an experience with non-monogamous relationships. It's not anything like yours. It wasn't as anywhere near as eloquent, or let's say, fueled by a prolonged lack of sexual activity. It was more like a kind of a kink.
Absolutely.
And it was unfortunately, okay, you can look at it from a number of different perspectives. I think it was a great lesson. And I think perhaps my partner at the time also learned something from that too. And it was also terrible because it was traumatic for her, for me to become almost addicted to that mindset that free love, we're free, we should love freely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It was a very strange experience, because I think even though I wanted it to be fueled from a place of love, I think it was fueled from a place of obsession. And lack. I had a huge lack of self-esteem. I was trying to fill that by, kind of proving to myself that I could do these things that were exciting and fun and required other people's consent. So that's another podcast episode. But it's funny, I have met people who have tried to do similar things and failed. I think most people that I've met who've tried to do this have failed. And you probably have better thoughts about it than I do as to what indicates whether you're going to have more success or not. But I would say it looks like if you're not already healthy in the mind, and if you're not already at least dedicated to each other, because commitment, you could put it in a different league. You could say, okay, that's marriage. But if you're not at least dedicated to each other's growth and your growth together, I feel like this is probably, going to be a very dangerous experiment. What do you think about that? Do you think that being married kind of gave you a support framework and some kind of safety belt for this?
I think it did for my husband. Again, being a little less traditional, my commitment isn't dictated by recognition, of others, including the government. And so I know what I have in this man. I have enough reference. He's a king. He's amazing. He's an incredible partner, an incredible father, an incredible uncle, an incredible friend, and thankfully, because I've dated plenty of people and I've ran the course and I've traveled the world, and, I've never lost perspective of who he is. And that has always served as my guiding light the whole time, and still does.
Yes, understood. And like, it's so if it works for him, it works for you. It's something that it wouldn't be able to happen without it, maybe, compromise. It's like, okay, how are we going to get through this together? Compromise is something, it's in a deficit now. We don't compromise with each other. We're very selfish, I think, as a culture.
Agreed.
So again, coming back to the whole kind of, I'm trying to understand, like, why is it working for you? Why doesn't it work for other people? Why is it such a taboo thing? I think it's such a taboo thing because people are so selfish, maybe to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think you are spot on. I really think you are spot on. And to be honest with you, there can be selfishness and honesty. Like, I'm kind of revisiting this whole like love is honesty answer that I gave, right? There can be selfishness and honesty. And so that was another thing that we had to sort of flesh out in our rules, was like, how honest are we agreeing to be? And do we want to be? And do we want each other to be? Because there are some things that may be better suited just remaining your own business. If I'm giving you permission and you are honoring our boundaries and you are being righteous in your choices, then, do I need to know every single little thing for you to clear your conscience and feel you're just being honest with me? No, not necessarily, And so our rules are very nuanced. And I think that it is the fact that, we are both very thoughtful people, I think. And, even going back to, hey, I feel like cheating. I do. I'm being honest about that. I do. But I'm not going to, I'm going to, stay in this with you for now, and then we'll revisit. And if I'm still feeling this itch and you're still not open to opening things up a bit, then let's talk about how this looks with us, are going our separate ways, and honoring ourselves and each other in this friendship, and, figuring it out from there. But it required a lot of patience. And there was like a good year and a half, where I really was like, man, I was craving so much more than I was receiving. And, we kept talking, we kept talking, so much talking. But it has really it has allowed my husband's emotional intelligence to shine in a way that actually brought about a whole new appreciation for me. Because even though I was the one sort of pushing the boundaries and the one that first exercised the permissions, he was the one that helped me learn to navigate it less clumsily. Because in the beginning, I did lie about who I was with when I first met someone, because he asked me not to tell him unless he asked me. Well, then if you're not asking, I don't want to force the information on you. And so now I don't know what to say because I'm meeting this person for brunch. And so I just said I was meeting a girlfriend, thinking I'm being respectful of his boundaries. And then he discovers that I actually was at brunch with this man and confronts me lovingly. But he says, no, like, of course, don't outwardly lie to me about who you're with. He said, you don't really need to even tell me who you're with. You can just say you're going to brunch. And if I want to know with who, I will ask. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I was very I was really clumsy about some things in the beginning.
Yeah.
And even though, he was the one, playing it a bit more docile once again, with what he was being given permission to do, he was still very much so like the teacher, ironically.
Yes. It's a learning curve, I think. There's not really a book on, is there a book on this? Has anyone written anything about this yet? Do you know?
There are. Yeah, there are. There's a book called Opening Up that I've recommended to people. And my husband and I also use the book as a sort of text, like a reference book. And it helps you understand all the terms and all the ways that this can be practiced and lived out. It was a little bit much for us at a lot of points. But it was useful, I suppose.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
Maybe it was written on a grassy hill somewhere in 1960.
Yes. Exactly.
I have to ask you, when you meet people that you are interested in, how does that look like? Obviously, you have to tell them, by the way, I'm in a relationship. It's not a conventional relationship. You'd have to be able to express that to them and explain that to them. And how do they react? And have you had any experiences where, they've kind of fallen in love with you maybe, or they've wanted to be with you afterward, and you just have to kind of move on?
Yeah, again, I think this is where my experience of having dated plenty of people in my life and having lived in communities, and I just have a lot of relationships to draw reference from. And I think that serves me well because I don't get swept up easy. And I can connect with people deeply, and I don't mistake it for love that needs to be committed to, if that makes sense, And so I really understand at this time that love is not a finite resource. I can love people and they will always hold that love for themselves in that lane, and then where my husband lives in my mind and in my world and in my heart is his own, and so when I've connected with people, I find that because I'm not afraid to go deep with people, I can go deep with people, and it's unnecessary to put that out in the forefront, to be presumptuous about people's agendas, and to kind of let things just evolve organically. And it will usually come up if it's becoming flirtatious or sexy, or even at times when I would go out to a club to go dancing, in the very beginning, that was a big part of this. I just wanted to feel sexy. And so even though I wasn't sleeping with people, I wanted to go out and dance with people in a way that was sexier than I would have when we had the monogamous, sort of rules on us, and that really was a lot of fun at that time. And so, but people would see my wedding ring and ask me, "Oh, you're married?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And they'd be like, "Oh, does he know you're here? Is this okay with him?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's totally okay with him." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then it just kind of sparks curiosity. And I would let people's questions sort of unravel, what else they wanted to know. But knowing, for myself, if there was somebody that I felt a desire to pursue things with further, then I might volunteer the information that, my husband and I have an open marriage, and kind of ask them about their situation, how they feel about, non-monogamy and the fact that I'm married, and that I'm very happy with my husband and have no intentions of leaving him. The first person that I connected with was also a sort of gypsy. He was a traveler. And I knew in the beginning, my husband asked me, who do you see connecting with? Who do you feel drawn to in this? Are you looking for, he wanted to understand what this might be. And we both did. And so I knew early on that there were two types of people I was likely to meet. One was just the sexy, fun, handsome, whatever, suitor, whatever, the person that just kind of caught my eye or whatever. But The second person was more of like the twin flame kind of type, that I know from experience can get really, really intense really quickly and can feel very soul deep and consuming. And that those people tend to become lifelong friends, and people that I want to know for the long haul. Right. And my husband didn't get that. And he would ask me, over and over again over the course of months, like, so tell me again about this twin flame thing. It's just not how he lives his life. He just doesn't see the world that way. He doesn't have friendships that feel that way to him, and I mean, I've met people I've not been sexual with, and I am kind of heteroflexible. I've been with women. I don't call myself fully bisexual, but I've certainly had some fun with some women in my life. And but I have girlfriends that I would see as twin flames, that it's a completely non-sexual relationship between us. But when there's a man that I feel that twin flame energy with, it can feel sexual really quickly for me, because it's just this sort of abundance of chemistry and connection and intellectual stimulation and energy. And it just, I don't know, for me, it can just translate into wanting to experience people fully. And so that was the sticky point for us, was like this whole twin flame character and like who that looked like. And I knew it would be rare and possibly impossible to even like meet, that person in the course of like whatever, our open relationship. I didn't know if I'd meet a twin flame, but I knew it was possible. And I wanted him to know that in that case, it would go beyond a sexual experience, and that there would at that point be emotions involved. And again, this was early on, before polyamory was a term we were comfortable with, right? It felt scary to us in the beginning, this idea of emotional connection. So the first guy that I connected with, of course, like the universe would do this, right? I'm not, again, a particularly religious or spiritual person, but also I'm very open to all the possibilities. And there are certainly things that happen sometimes where I just kind of chuckle at the universe. So I'm like, okay, this is just beyond coincidence. And I met a man who was like total twin flame kind of like character. And he was riding a motorcycle around the country, and I'm a motorcyclist, and he's this like traveler with this like beautiful mind. He was a writer. And man, it was literally the night that my husband and I sort of officially shook hands on opening our marriage. I decided to go out and just kind of explore on my bike. And I like met this person, and I'm like, of course I did. Of course I did, because this is how life works. This is always how my life has worked. And we spent a summer together, and it was really beautiful, but he was really young and really, yes, he definitely connected with me deeply emotionally. And he started to drop little comments about wishing I would run away with him and wishing I would, just get on my motorcycle or get on his motorcycle at that time, and just travel with him and this and that. And I would just laugh it off. I mean, as sweet and poetic as it was, I knew that he was a young butterfly and that he had a whole journey ahead of him and so many love stories to discover. And it was able to just kind of be what it was for me. And we're still friends now, but not involved sexually.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. So so we're saying, okay, I just want to make the distinction here. So there's people you'll meet where you have a sexual connection, and that's basically it, and that's fine. And then you have the other type, which are the twin flame, as you put it, people who have more than a sexual connection, and that was a sticky point for you and your husband to get through, because obviously he was concerned of building a very deep connection with someone else. How did he handle the fact that you were going to spend time with someone for a summer can be quite long, I guess. Do you just go away and kind of do your thing, and he trusts you completely, or do you stay in touch, and does he want to kind of be updated about things? Because I imagine based on what you've said so far, that wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't. So this was when we first opened things up. We'd been together for like 7 or 8 years at this point, right? And so it was really awkward. And I felt really afraid of losing him and this being a one-sided thing for right now, even though I gave him permission I even offered for our first experience to be us bringing a woman into the bedroom. I thought that any man would jump on that opportunity. And my husband felt uncomfortable with that. He said that he wanted it to feel more equal and he would prefer it be a couple, which I was like gawking at. I couldn't believe that was his response, but that's who he is. And so, like in the beginning, I was very clumsy. I was lying about where I was going because he wasn't asking and I didn't want to force it on him. And so I would go and spend time with this man and tell my husband that I was with a girlfriend, And so there was nothing to question and nothing to feel weird about because he thought I was just with a girlfriend until one day, because one of our rules is that we always answer the phone. We're not the types that put each other under surveillance. And so if one of us is calling each other, it's important and it's for a reason, right? And so there was a night that we were out on his motorcycle and I was on the back and I didn't hear my phone ringing. And so I didn't answer his call until, almost 45 minutes later. And he's like, my gosh, are you okay? He was concerned about me genuinely. And so I told him I was, and I said, I was on the back of a motorcycle and I was honest, but then he was like, on the back of a motorcycle? Wait, what? This was the very first time. And so it was, oh my God, I just remember being so nervous talking about it, but I was totally honest with him. But then he started to unravel the fact that this entire summer was spent with me connecting with this person and saying that I'm with girlfriends when I'm not. And that's when he sort of, helped put me on the right path to handling that more gracefully, and how I can tell him without telling him, if that makes sense, like how I can be honest without telling him unsolicited details. Right.
Yes.
And so that was helpful, but that's how it was in the beginning.
I think it's different for everyone, probably. I mean, there's probably no one way of doing it. We're all so very different. We have different needs, different fears, different wants, different character traits, different experiences, histories. We're sensitive, we're not so much. There's just an unlimited combination of ways that you could handle this situation. And I think, but ultimately, what I've learned from this conversation is I think there's a lot of value in being completely honest with your partner. If you're going to spend the rest of your life with someone, you want to spend it being yourself.
Definitely.
And you don't want to, like what happens many times, I think, more than I think should, is we try to squeeze ourselves into this box of what it means traditionally and culturally to be a partner in a committed relationship. And I think if you can be honest and if you can be with someone and if you also can have that emotional intelligence, which essentially it's emotional intelligence, right?
So.
It's like,
oh yeah.
It's like, well, yes, I do have jealousy. I am a jealous person at times, and I don't enjoy the idea of that happening to someone that I would say is mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to review what it means to be in a committed relationship, because what is it, like 50% of relationships, marriages, or divorces? I don't know now. I think it's higher than that, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I mean, there must be something here, right? There's got to be something that we're missing.
Well, because when for me, what I found is that, and he has stepped into exercising it on his end at this point, so it didn't remain one-sided. And over time, what we realized is that, this ideal I had in my mind that I'd be able to just be very sexual with people, even though in my past, I enjoyed promiscuity a lot, to be honest. But at this age and having a child and just stepping into a very different chapter of my life, I actually didn't feel safe personally, just sleeping around with men that I found attractive. And so it very quickly became a scenario where there were real feelings involved. And these were actual relationships and friendships with people that felt safe because I needed to know them before I felt safe sharing myself with them in any capacity. And so we just realized that even though we were afraid of the title, by all definitions, it really was polyamory that we were practicing,
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
How did that feel for you when he decided to also take part?
Well, It felt, it sort of lived in my imagination before we started talking about it. And I would imagine him doing things, and it was exciting, to be honest, because again, this very passive energy that he had given me for so many years, to imagine him feeling sexy and to imagine another woman appreciating him and seeing how amazing he is. It did kind of just give me a little spark of life that had dulled, you know. I knew for myself that there are times in my monthly cycle that I am more open-minded and less open-minded, right? And so there are times when I feel very sexual and excited, and other times where I'm very sensitive, and I just sort of want to feel the sanctuary of my home and my family, right? And so it was very important to me that he not share anything with me unless I asked, because there's just sometimes I'm not going to want to hear the story, and I'm going to be too jealous, even though some might call that hypocritical because of, you know, what I'm experiencing on my end. But so when I first found out, or like asked him a question, he sort of admitted that there was like this connection he had made at work. You know, I definitely had that little twinge of just like excessive curiosity. My husband is like, he's just much steadier than I am, with like, he's so emotionally intelligent. He's just so like thoughtful. And so for him, you know, that's why it took him a year to even kind of process the proposition that I had laid out, you know, and then an entire year later, you know, he's kind of got his game plan and he stands by it. I'm much more reactionary. I'm much more impulsive, and together we kind of find a balance. But, so yeah, I definitely had a lot of like nagging curiosity to know everything, you know, and I couldn't, because it just was unreasonable. And so I had to sort of check myself and allow him to have his experience. But what's wild is that the experience that got the deepest and the most involved was actually with my current boyfriend's wife. And she's a dear friend of mine. And so and I like borderline played matchmaker because it just felt like such a good match to me. And she's someone that I felt deserved him because I know her and I trust her, and she's beautiful and she's a healthy person and she makes good choices. And so I felt really safe giving that, not even giving that permission, but like making that connection, like encouraging that connection. And they had their own, like they liked each other, like it was there, you know, but I think he needed to feel really safe with my feelings around it to like go full steam, you know, ahead. And it was the first time that I had experienced compersion, which is like a polyamory term. Compersion is experiencing the joy of others through the joy that they're experiencing, right? And so because I knew her, it put me close enough to their experience. Like when I would get details from him about a physical interaction they would have, I would be able to live vicariously in a way that gave me excitement and that made me feel pleasure and like joy and like excitement for them and for myself, to be so close to them. And so that kind of blew my world wide open, to be honest, like genuinely experiencing that feeling of compersion. Yeah. So, but I know I wouldn't feel that as much with a woman I don't know, because then I do feel more insecurity. You know, he's still allowed to do that. And you know, that I don't even know what he's up to fully, because we just don't really keep each other under that tight of watch. And so it's quite possible that he has other connections that he enjoys. And I don't really even want to know about them, to be honest, because I trust him. I trust him to make good choices and to keep me safe and to keep our family safe. And I don't really feel that I have access to that compersion in the same way because of who I am, as if I know the woman. Yeah.
Understandable. This compersion that you talk of, first time I've heard that word, by the way, I think. But I relate to that too. I do. It's a conflicting feeling somehow, because I've imagined it. It's never happened to me, but I think when I was going through that phase and I was like, you know, maybe you should, you know, try. What have you got to lose? So I would kind of like be in the mindset of like, what would it be like? How would it feel? And I genuinely wanted to know. I genuinely wanted to experience that, because I wanted to open my heart to the feeling that I was having, which was, I can love like unlimited amount, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, when you speak about it, and maybe people don't understand what you're really trying to say. It can sound very airy fairy, right? It's like kind of like a hippie kind of thing, but right, you know what I
And it
mean?
is maybe a little bit of that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think well, yes, it's a very spiritual thing. I think it's a very kind of, well, it's just a very deep feeling, isn't it, of kind of like joy when you know that someone else is experiencing pleasure. It's not sexual necessarily. It's just pleasure. Love is what the word is, I think. And when you try to box that love in, it doesn't feel as good. I'm not qualified enough to talk about this, as you can tell. So I'm struggling to find my words. But I think emotional intelligence at the end of the day is something we all need to work on. It doesn't mean that I think, and I'm not looking for a polyamorous relationship. I just do genuinely feel that there is something there. I think there's something there for the right kind of couple. I don't think it works for everyone, and I don't think it's supposed to work for everyone. But I think if it can work, I think it's great. I think it's a very mature and deep connection that you can have with someone if you can have that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it has brought us full circle back to each other. And that has been one of the most beautiful and sort of unexpected things, because I think we both knew we were gambling with this. We knew that this could break us up. You know, we knew that we could meet other people that maybe grabbed our attention in a way that trumped, you know, what we had. But I had a feeling that it wouldn't, because I thought that I knew what I had in him, and I felt pretty in touch with that. But it's a risk, you know, and it's a risk for sure, giving him permission. Like, it really scared me. But there is sort of, I don't know, maybe an ego boost, or like there's something to it that is actually strengthening when you don't feel locked in or confined by someone, but yet feel they're the best and continue to choose them, right? I know it's maybe a little ridiculous, but it is just, it is like, it's reaffirming to know, like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm connecting with these people, and you are still my
Right.
choice. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to summarize it. It's like, you can give yourself away, but you're going to come back. It's like, it's that metaphor of letting the bird go when it flies back to you.
Completely. It makes it more special somehow, you know, that like, you're not confined to this. You don't even have to come back to me, but you do. And it makes me so grateful. And it makes me like love what we have so much more, because it feels so authentic, you know? And we are sexual again. Like it brought us back to each other sexually, which is
Right, I
so
was going to
wild.
ask you. Yeah, I was going to.
Oh my
I
God.
was expecting you to say that, actually.
Oh my God. The first like great sexual encounter that we had it was actually after he had his first hookup with my girl, this friend of mine whose husband I date and have been seeing now for 15 months. And again, I mean, she's like a dear, dear friend. Like, we take our kids out together. We, you know, traveled together. She's like a sister in some ways, you know, and she's amazing. Her kids are my kids' best friends. And so they had this experience, and like on the same night, like he was with her and I was with her husband. He and I went and got a room, and my husband and her were in their home. And so we went and took a walk the next day in a nature preserve, and, you know, holding hands was our first time both having an experience at the same time. Right. And so we were kind of giddy and just like, all right, you start. I mean, we've been together 12 years at this point, right? And this is a first. And so he started, and he's like, well, what do you want to know? I'm like, everything, like literally everything. Like, do not spare me any details. And it was coming from a place of just genuine compersion, which excited him, right? So he starts sharing all the details with me. I mean, everything, like picking her up, carrying her into the bathroom and setting her on the countertop, and, this crazy, sexy, super passionate experience with her. And I was like, oh my God, I was so jealous, but so turned on. And so like all the feelings, right? And he's like, all right, well, now what about you? And I was like, oh my God. And so I tell him my experience, and we're like, wow. And it was bizarre. It was like otherworldly, just a strange emotion between us. But that night, it was sort of this like reclaiming of territory with each other. And it was the best sex we had in a decade, genuinely. And then that kicked off this whole like super fun, sexy reconnection that we had. It really helped us.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really amazing. And I can imagine that too. I mean, exactly. It's like you feel so open and loving and nurturing and caring, and there is something sexy about that for sure. Yeah.
It's wild.
That's impressive. That's just it's been an amazing conversation. It's really opened my mind to a different perspective. I mean, I obviously it's not the first time I've learned about this, but to hear it discussed by someone who's actually doing it in a marriage of that length is eye-opening, I would say. It's very challenging because it challenges the way you look at these structures and your life and your needs and I suppose your abilities as a couple. What are you actually capable of? Do you really talk about things? Do you really communicate? All of those are, I suppose, ideas that, this conversation is kind of stirred up in me. So thank you so much for sharing what you did with me. You didn't have to, but you did, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
People listen to this, I think they're gonna at least have a paradigm shift, and it will open up food for thought for a lot of couples around the world, hopefully. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and it's an amazing relationship you have, and it's an amazing husband you have as well.
Yeah, he really is. Thank you though for the conversation. I'm excited to listen in on your other episodes.
Yeah, thank you.